Hey guys, welcome to Ghost Pirate Entertainment. My name is Kanan Becker, and here's another top 10 horror movies you can watch right now on Tubi. So let's get this list started. Coming in at number 10, Hatchet. Hatchet is totally a throwback to the old school slasher films, Friday the 13th, Halloween, Black Christmas, etc. But it also wants to kind of poke fun at itself, so it's definitely over the top. It pushes the boundaries. It makes you laugh out loud. It's not quite a spoof, but it definitely makes fun of itself. It knows it's B-rated. It knows it's low budget. So it takes advantage of that, and it pokes fun at itself. And it's just like buckets of blood being thrown. Like, it's just really silly, but fun. And also pretty badass. A lot of really legit practical effects. It has guest appearances from Tony Todd, Kane Hodder, Robert Englund, etc. The story is basically some friends are down in New Orleans trying to show a friend who's just got through a tough breakup a good time. And they decide to go on a tour of the swamps, like a swamp tour basically. And they hear this story of the legend of Victor Crowley. It's basically a ghost story, so to speak. And things get crazy. Basically, he's not a ghost. He's out and just starts killing people. And it's just a bloody good time. So if you're looking for something that's just fun, not too serious, some real silly gore over the topness kind of thing, Hatchet's a great movie at my number 10 spot. Alright, sliding in at number 9, My Bloody Valentine. So for fans of slasher movies, I definitely recommend this one. It's definitely in the same genre as a Friday the 13th, but it has some different twists to it. For one, I really like his weapon, that he uses a pickaxe versus a knife. You don't see killers use pickaxes really, so I think that element's pretty cool. He looks really cool, but the story is basically about a miner who's buried alive and ends up killing the other miners that are buried with him in order to preserve oxygen, I guess, for himself. Goes into a coma. When he wakes up, he goes on a killing spree. Basically, he loses his mind, I guess, in there. And so that's basically the concept of My Bloody Valentine. But the thing that I really enjoy about My Bloody Valentine is that, unlike a lot of slasher movies like Friday the 13th, it actually has a pretty good story, and it definitely has some twists and turns throughout the story. It has a twist ending, but just in general throughout the whole movie, it twists and turns. So if you're into the slasher genre of movies and you have not seen My Bloody Valentine, I highly recommend it. Coming in at number 9, My Bloody Valentine. So our number 8 movie, Resident Evil. So the thing I love so much about Resident Evil is the stylization of it. It's very stylized. It's this really modern, clean, science-based type of horror that I hadn't personally seen anything that had done this clean sci-fi type of horror movie before. And it just has this really, clean, fast-paced, high-tech type of way about it that I just felt so fascinated by. And I've always loved about Resident Evil for that. The other Resident Evils are cool. I've seen most of them, if not all of them. But this one in particular, the first Resident Evil in particular, I've always felt was by far the best. I love the soundtrack of Resident Evil. The soundtrack is so important to having this fast-paced energy about the movie. So the story basically of Resident Evil is that there's this corporation, the Umbrella Corporation, who is basically the biggest corporation around, and they are the ones everybody goes through for tech and medical and weaponry and basically anything that's high tech, so to speak. So of course they're delving into experiments and weaponry experiments with chemicals, and they're playing around with virus warfare and chemical warfare and things like that. So basically the Umbrella Corporation has this underground lab called the Hive. Basically the dead come back to life and all hell breaks loose, and our characters go down there to see what's going on. They don't know that this is basically going on. They get down there, dead are coming back to life, and all hell is breaking loose, basically. If you've never seen Resident Evil, just picture Night of the Living Dead meets The Matrix. So if you're into high energy zombie movies, Resident Evil is your thing. So coming in at number 8, Resident Evil. My number 7 movie, Nightbreed. Nightbreed is very much like a fantasy type of horror. It definitely has a feel of Hellraiser in ways. You know, it's definitely not as gory or in that direction. It's much more of a fantasy type of feeling. To me, Nightbreed is one of the more creative horror movies. It creates this really cool fantasy horror other realm feel about it that's unique, that I haven't seen done in other horror movies. So that to me is one of my favorite things about it. So basically the story of Nightbreed is this guy goes to see his psychiatrist. He's having these crazy dreams of these monsters in this other realm, and then his psychiatrist basically convinces him that he's going crazy and that he's killing people. He basically frames him for these murders and makes him look like he's a serial killer, and then the police shoot him down. So he goes to this other realm, but the guy's basically brought back to life by the Nightbreed, by this other realm that he's dreaming about, and they bring him back to life so they can basically stop the psychiatrist from killing again. The psychiatrist, who is the actual real serial killer, he has the coolest mask. He's definitely one of my favorite killers of any horror movie. But if you're into wanting to see something a little different, a little more fantasy horror, not just straight slasher horror like a lot of the ones on this list, then I think you'll love this movie, especially if you've never seen it. It's got a lot of that great 80s practical effects and these monsters, and it's just a cool movie. So coming in at number 7, Nightbreed. Coming in at number 6, Lazarus Effect. Lazarus Effect is about a scientist married couple who are working on a way to bring back the dead. And it's done in a really realistic type of way. It doesn't feel super hocus pocusy. It talks about like they accidentally stumbled upon a way to revive the dead, and they're trying in different species. Eventually they work their way up to reviving this dog. And basically an accident happens, and an accident happens and it goes beyond the dog and things start to get wild. So this is a cool movie. It kind of has a little bit of a Pet Sematary vibe meets Flatliners. It's kind of a cross between the two. It's a little more on the medical side like Flatliners, not quite so zombie-ish like Pet Sematary, but it is like a nice mix between the two. It's really fast-paced, takes a little bit to get going in the beginning, but once the movie fully gets going, it's just really quick, one thing after another. It's got some really cool effects, really cool lighting situation where there's in elements there's limited light and you're trying to see what, you can't quite see what's around you. It does a really good job with lighting to add this really creepy factor. A lot of the movie takes place inside of their lab where things start to go crazy. So it has one of those claustrophobic feelings that I really like about a lot of horror movies when they deal with you feeling trapped. This does a really good job of giving you that feeling of being trapped. So I always enjoy that in horror movies. Alright, so my number 6 pick, Lazarus Effect. Alright guys, so coming in now at number 5, Troll Hunter. So Troll Hunter is a Norwegian fantasy horror movie. And so you have to watch it in subtitles, of course, but the subtitles aren't bad. So the subtitles aren't bad, so don't worry about that. It's not a ton of dialogue. But the story basically centers on some college students who are trying to do a paper on bear hunting. And they basically stumble across these rumors about this guy, and so they start following this guy. And basically things get weirder and weirder. They see these huge crazy claw marks on the side of his Jeep, and it just gets like more and more bizarre as they follow this guy. Well, basically it turns out, and this isn't a spoiler because it's right in the name, but basically you quickly find out that trolls are real. So you're in a reality where trolls are a real thing. And so on the surface that sounds really cheesy and like, what is going on? Like, how would I want to watch that? But trust me, it's not. It's actually really grisly, really hardcore. It gets pretty brutal. It's definitely found footage, so if you're not a fan of found footage stuff, this may not be your cup of tea, but as far as found footage goes, I think this one is extremely well done. It's honestly, I just recently saw it. I've heard about it for years, but I just recently watched it, and I was just blown away. I was like, right away, this is one of my favorite found footage movies I've ever seen. It's extremely fast-paced. It just feels like you're on a really cool adventure, through the woods of Norway, and they come across all these people and hearing all these stories, and then they start to actually see these trolls. And these are not your normal trolls, like from nursery rhymes. These are big, brutal, vicious, nasty things. And it's just actually really cool. It's a really fun ride. It's not extremely scary, but at the same time, I wouldn't recommend it for little children, but it's not crazy scary by any means. But it definitely has its moments. And it's definitely more on the side of thriller than it is like grisly, brutal horror. But it definitely has still got its horror movie moments too. So, this is a horror fantasy thriller adventure, But I highly recommend. Coming in at number 5, Troll Hunter. So coming in at number 4, Exorcist III. So this is the third film in the Exorcist series. And most people, know Exorcist is one of the most legendary horror movies. It's one of the Mount Rushmore of horror movies. But then a lot of people also know Exorcist II is just crap. It's just really, really bad. But Exorcist III, unfortunately, probably because of how bad Exorcist II did, it fell under the radar. People just have not seen this movie. And I'm telling you, it's a gem. Personally, I actually like it more than the original Exorcist. And I know that's like sacrilegious, so to speak, in the horror, in the horror world. But I honestly think it's a better film. You're basically following a detective who is really good friends with a priest. And these grisly murders start happening. And things just get more and more bizarre. And they're starting to think something's going on, but they can't quite figure out what's going on. People start dying, friends of the detective start dying, and it starts to look like more than just serial killer out there, that it might be a little more supernatural than that. But I don't want to say any more without giving it away. But there's extremely solid acting in this movie. A really well done script, really nice pacing, which to me is the thing I think I like more than the original Exorcist. Is the original Exorcist is a slow burn. And it's a great movie, don't get me wrong, I love it. But it's a little bit of a slow burn. Whereas Exorcist III is a little more of an upbeat movie with a little bit more happening, and it keeps me more engaged. There's less lulls and less long drawn out dialogue without things happening. The editing, the way it's edited, as well as the way it's shot, gives it a little bit more of an exciting feel to me. Not so much happens in one location as well, which also adds to it feeling like it's moving a little bit faster. The other thing that is amazing about this movie, that the people that do know about this know of, is there's a couple really, like some of the original jump scare type of scenes, and one of the greatest ever done, which you'll know when it happens, but it's very, very famous. It's just a fun movie with some really grisly scenes, some really fun kills, and some really exciting jump scares. It's just a great movie, and if you've never seen it, I highly recommend it. At number 4, Exorcist III. Coming in at number 3 on my list, 2013's Evil Dead. So starting out, I just gotta say, this poor girl in this movie. Damn. But seriously, this is a badass movie, and I don't think it gets the credit it deserves because it is a remake, so to speak, of the Evil Dead. And Evil Dead is such an iconic movie, and it's thought of as this campy type of sort of cheesy, low budget type of horror movie that has this dark humor to it, and I love it. Okay, I think most horror fans love Evil Dead. So don't get me wrong, I love Evil Dead 1 and 2. I mean, they're just brilliant movies. But this is a totally different look at it. It takes that same story, but it takes the campy comedy element out and just does it up as a serious, scary, gory as hell movie. talk about blood. There's buckets and buckets of blood in this movie, especially as you get towards the end. And I don't see how you could be a diehard horror fan and not enjoy this movie. It is just bloody, brutal, gory, good time. And it takes a serious look at it, which I think is fresh and different. The story starts out with a group of friends who are out in the woods in a cabin who meet up there to help one of them go cold turkey off of drugs. She's a drug addict, and she pleads her brother and her friends to be there for her, with her at this cabin so she can get clean. And basically, it starts out as just that, and she's going through withdrawals and all that. And then they discover in the basement, they discover this evil book and some gruesome stuff. One of the characters basically reads from the book, similar to the original Evil Dead. And basically all hell breaks loose. And it just gets more and more gory, more and more violent, more and more just crazy demon possession goodness. So if you're into stuff that's just gory, brutal, horror fun, this is perfect for you. So I highly recommend this, but not if you're squeamish and not if you're not into gorier type of horror. So once again, coming in at number 3, 2013's Evil Dead. Okay, so coming in at the number 2 spot, Black Christmas. So Black Christmas is a very dark film. I really enjoyed how the opposites came together with the warmth of Christmas and that loving, comforting, warm feeling that you get at Christmas time with all the Christmas symbols and glow of the Christmas tree and fireplaces. And then it's completely juxtaposition of this dark, cold-blooded killer who's lurking in the shadows. And this movie does it in such a cool way because it has this character that's killing as your stalker. So you don't see him for most of the movie. You're seeing things from his point of view as he's killing and he's lurking in the shadows and he's spying on people. And that just gives this really chilling, discomforting type of feel about everything. So Black Christmas is the OG of the stalker slasher horror films. The only one that is before this really is Peeping Tom. So this really is kind of the first, or at least, one of the very first, because it predates, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Halloween. It predates all those. It is very dark and it is very twisted. So if you're not into movies that are warped with this twisted sense of mental illness, serial killer craziness, this is not your deal. But if you're really into that stuff, or you dig, that slasher, really creepy, borderline feeling extremely real, that type of thing, then this movie is badass. No matter what, this movie is very important because it predates those other movies, and it really heavily influences the way those directors and writers and stuff were thinking when they did stuff like Halloween and Friday the 13th, etc. So it's such an important film in cinema history. So just for that alone, to me, I wanted to put it on this list because it is horror legend status type of thing. Without this movie, you wouldn't probably have Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, etc., etc., etc. So once again, my number 2 movie, Black Christmas. Coming in at my number 1 spot, Reanimator. Reanimator is just such a good time horror movie. It is that nutty, crazy, mentally fucked up in the head scientist who's just going crazy with his experiments. And he is just such a kooky, awesome character in this movie. Basically, there's just a mad scientist who figures out a way to bring back the dead, and it's just all his experiments going absolutely haywire, and it just gets crazier and crazier and crazier as he brings back these dead people, and they never seem to go the way he's planning. Things just seem to get more and more crazy as it goes, and it's just a blast. It is very gory, but done in kind of a fun 1980s neon type of way. I love the really bright neon graphics, especially in the beginning of the movie. It just has a great 80s look, great 80s acting style. If you dig 80s horror movies, Reanimator is definitely in that best of the best category. The practical effects are astounding. Some of my favorite, gory special effects ever done are in this movie. Everything from decapitation to body dismemberment to just literally buckets of blood flying around. It's just a great, fun movie with a pretty warped story. The story is kind of not super important. It's not that deep of a story. It's really just about having a good time and a warped, twisted, gore fest type of sense of humor. But it's serious enough that it's still fun. It's not a spoof movie at all. If you love horror movies, which if you're watching this you probably do, and you've never seen Reanimator, it's got to be the first movie you go and watch off this list. Reanimator is so iconic and just fun, and just Reanimator is a great movie. Like, you will have so much fun watching Reanimator. I promise you that. So until next time, guys, I really appreciate watching this list, and I will see you guys next time.